Calling this morning's hearing on the Energy and Environmental Committee bills to order. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Today is Tuesday, February 4th, 9 a.m., and we are meeting in conference room 325. We have a number of measures to consider today, and I wanted to thank Chair Lowen for joining me, and I'm sure we'll have other members joining us as well as we move through the measures. The first bill we're going to consider will be House Bill 1077, and the first to testify will be Will Kane with Office of the Governor here in person.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. Will Kane on Office of the Governor. Thank you for having this hearing. So just a quick background. We have our testimony submitted in strong support. This is the Gov Admin bill. And a little background, as I said. So after the Maui wildfires, Governor put together the climate advisory team. And out of that came a slew of very good recommendations. And one of those is that we need to increase our funding for climate mitigation and resiliency projects across the state. And so some of the recommendations put forward were to look at increasing the TAT, to then put that there. We talked to industry a bit too, and we also want to make sure that we're bifurcating that a little bit to allow the climate mitigation resiliency special fund to be stood up and have those projects and a process to move those out, and also a second one, the economic development and revitalization special fund that would allow these projects and other things to occur within the tourism areas or resort districts that would, which is, part of the intent, obviously, of the TAT itself. So I'm happy to answer any other specific questions.
Thank you. We will ask questions following all of the testifiers on this measure. Next to testify, we have the Hawaii Office of the Governor Recovery and Resilience Unit in support on Zoom, Luke Myers.
Good morning, chairs. My name is Luke Myers. I'm the branch chief of the Office of Recovery and Resilience Unit. We stand on our written testimony in support and are available for any questions. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And I did actually just want to provide some clarification, as we are going to have a number of testifiers on Zoom today. Couple of comments. We'd like you to please keep yourself muted and your video off while you're waiting to testify. And after your testimony is complete, the Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use that chat for technical issues. And if you are disconnected unexpectedly, which we have had some technical difficulties in recent days, you may attempt to rejoin this meeting. If you're disconnected while presenting the testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note that the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule this hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making, and in that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. We'd also like to note that because morning hearings must adjourn prior to the noon floor session, not all testifiers may have the opportunity to testify. So in that event, please know that your written testimony will be considered by the committee. Having shared that, I'd like to move on to the next testifier, the Attorney General's Office with comments on Zoom.
Good morning. My name is John Cole with the Department of the Attorney General. I just wanted to point out that Section 2 of the bill that establishes the Climate Mitigation and Resiliency Special Fund, included in that establishment, it says the monies to be deposited into the special fund include fees collected under this chapter or any rule thereunder. I wanted to point out that the new chapter does not authorize the collection of fees. So accordingly, we recommend that either that provision be deleted or I have an amendment included in my testimony that would authorize the imposition and collection of fees. Thank you. I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Next to testify, we have Emma Ewan, DLNR, in support in person. Thank you. Next to testify, we have DOTAX with comments in person. Thank you. We also have DBET in support, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency in support, Hawaii Tourism Authority offering comments. Hawaii State Energy Office in support in person. Thank you. Next is Mary Alice Evans from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development in support. And then we have Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support in person. Thank you so much. Next we have Leigh Laramie, Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission in support on Zoom. Next, we have Climate Advisory Team, Kavika Riley, in support in person.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and Committee. My name is Kavika Riley. I'm a volunteer member of the Climate Advisory Team. We've submitted testimony in support with comments. Because we provided comments, I just wanted to clarify the two main areas that we are commenting on, which of course we strongly support the intent of this legislation and the steps being taken forward here. We see our comments as adding to a very solid foundation in the form of the bill as introduced. The two main areas in which we provide comments and suggestions are first the composition of the committee that will make decisions about the fund. We are grateful for all of the entities that are listed, but we wanted to make two suggestions. First was the addition of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands as our state's second largest land manager, being a critical part of addressing a variety of resilience, climate-related needs there. And then we had suggestions regarding the qualifications of the two at-large members who may be appointed. We suggest that those individuals, along with everything that's already in the bill, also come with the qualifications that could be related to a climate science background, climate resilience, conservation, or built infrastructure expertise, so they can add that expertise to the decision-making of the fund. The other suggestion was just clarifying in terms of the use of the fund, that in addition to it being available to support very critical, important state-led resilience efforts, that it also be explicit in the bill that the community-led resilience efforts that are also a very important part of this strategy also be allowed to be funded through this initiative. We're available for any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing this bill.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii, with comments on Zoom.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Tom Yamachika.
Mr. Yamachika, could you turn up your volume or perhaps move closer to your speaker, please?
Thank you. Is this better?
A bit better, yes.
Thank you. Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii. The resilience efforts that are described in this bill are critically important, but we have concerns about the back end. This bill has a special fund that does not meet the criteria for a special fund in section 37-52.3 HRS. That's one. It also has a TAT increase. Tourists don't have unlimited pockets. And although they don't vote at our ballot boxes, they vote with their feet. And we just need to realize that when they do, we have economic effects that are secondary to this that are likely to happen and probably will happen. And finally, I did hear one testifier say that this was the intent of the TAT. The intent of the TAT was to build a convention center, and that's done. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have Hawaii Land Trust in support. Next, we have Kohala Coast Resort Association in opposition on Zoom.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify via Zoom. My name is Stephanie Donahoe. I'm the Administrative Director for the Kohala Coast Resort Association. While I appreciate what the committee tasked with looking at climate action was doing, and while I appreciate that there are huge needs within the state of Hawaii, my primary comments in opposition are that the transient accommodations tax currently are not being collected equitably amongst all accommodations types. We get into a challenge when we say a hotel tax. Unfortunately, hotels and timeshares are the ones that are paying the majority of the transient accommodations tax now, though the transient accommodations tax does apply to all accommodations types, including short-term vacation rentals. In my written testimony, I provided some specific examples, but for members of the committee who are there, as an example, the Kohala Coast Resort Association represents a portion of the hotels and timeshares that are located on Hawaii Island. We're on the Kohala Coast between Kauai High and Kona and represent about 4,000 units when it comes down to it between hotels and timeshares. We paid to the state the majority of the transient accommodations taxes that were collected, and to Hawaii County, the majority of the transient accommodations taxes that they collected there. However, Granicus, who works with numerous counties and states around the country, has seen that there are almost 8,900 short-term vacation rentals on Hawaii Island. They showed what those vacation rentals' average daily rates were, what their occupancy was, and based on what we've seen and what we know we pay, the math isn't adding up. Our concern is that the state is not collecting the transient accommodations taxes that are currently due from everyone who owes them. And until that can happen, we really can't justify an increase in TAT, even for a cause as important as dealing with climate change. Rep. Cush, I see that you are in attendance, and as an example, there are more transient accommodations tax owing facilities in the Hamakua district than there are rooms at the Westin Hapuna. If you use the alltherooms.com data, you can see that there are more than 300 units just in 96727. So until that there is an equitable playing field in the accommodation sector, we cannot support any increase to the transient accommodations tax. And to echo what Tom Yamachika said, we are in decline. Our hotels are struggling, and our visitors will vote with their feet. So I, as noble as this bill may be, I don't think that we've fully thought through the unintended consequences if we raise our transient accommodations tax rate by another 1.75% as the bill is requesting. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Granicus has been in contact with Department of Taxation. I know they've been in contact with the finance directors from the other parts of the counties, but we're looking for an equitable playing field, and we're looking for all taxpayers to be treated the same way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt just to remind everyone, we do have your written testimony. We have a long agenda today. We have a lot of questions that we want to ask all the people here. We did review your testimony in advance, so if you know, we don't typically impose a time limit in this committee, but unless you have something new to add or a point that you feel like, you know, must be said now and not just in written testimony, can you please stand on written testimony just to help us keep things moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So next we have, well, actually we have 3G International in opposition, Coalition Earth in support, Ted Boland, Climate Protectors Hawaii in support in person.
I'll be very brief. Ted Boland for Climate Protectors Hawaii. Hello, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Peruso, committee member. I think the legislature several years ago wisely declared that we're in a climate emergency. I think that's become more obvious after Lahaina and rain bombs, et cetera. We need to do something to plan now or we're going to pay later. I don't particularly care whether we do it through the TAT or the next bill. I just want to say that we need to finance this stuff now or we're going to pay later. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Pacific Whale Foundation in support, Care for Aina Now, with comments in person.
Aloha, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jocelyn Herbert from Resources Legacy Fund on behalf of the Care for Aina Now Coalition.
And I'm Kenny Miranda from the Nature Conservancy Hawaii in Palmyra.
The Care for Aina Now Coalition represents over 60 organizations that support these kinds of policies, that we must have additional funding for natural resource protection and restoration. We must have it to help deal with the climate crises now. We know that we need to significantly increase funding for natural resource stewardship to keep our communities safe from wildfires, floods, and degrading our ecosystems. We've identified a $560 million annual funding gap that needs to be addressed urgently. And this bill is a really important vehicle to help us address all of these shortfalls. We have recommended in our written testimony 6 specific changes to the bill. I won't belabor them now, but briefly, one, that the Climate Mitigation and Resiliency Fund should be housed within the Department of Land and Natural Resources, not the Department of Defense. 2, we want to ensure the fund can fund the Department of Land and Natural Resources and Department of Hawaiian Homelands. As our colleagues have said, they have a significant amount of conservation lands that they're responsible for as well. We want to make sure that the bill expressly authorizes community grants. That's a key part of how we take care of our aina in Hawaii. And we want to make sure that we affirm Native Hawaiian claims to the Public Land Trust revenue and prioritize projects that address climate resilience. We also agree with the comment regarding including additional members from Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Office of Planning, and that the at-large members have some climate
if you can
resilience.
summarize, we do have your written testimony.
I'm all done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Moving on, we have testimony in opposition from Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, from Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association with comments, and from the Maui Chamber of Commerce in opposition. Additionally, we have testimony from 3 individuals in support and 7 individuals in opposition to this measure. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Chair Lowen.
Starting with the governor's office, I guess. Will. In your understanding of it, what is a climate mitigation and resiliency project?
So I think there's a broad stroke of what those are, right? So they can be infrastructure projects, whether it's, hardening or coastal erosion or coastal mitigation projects. It can be, wildfire mitigation of clearing of lands. It can be, the breadth and sweep of all of those different things. It's not just, it's just not concrete and fixing those things too, but it's providing across the board.
Well, so the examples that you provided, like coastal erosion, resilience, infrastructure, et cetera, like a lot of that is addressed through work that's done in the executive branch already, and is line itemed in the budget. Often there's multiple funding sources, including federal funding for a lot of those infrastructure projects. So why would we route it to an additional bureaucratic structure within Department of Defense to be decided how the money is spent by a group outside of the legislature when that is fundamentally what we do?
So I think what we're looking at is that the amount of money that we have available right now is not enough, right? So the climate advisory team identified that we need hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and I think other groups has as well, that currently.
But if we increase the revenue by increasing TAT, then why would we not, if that is a priority for the legislature, why would we then route it through a different committee and a different structure?
Right, so I think part of the issue is that as things progress, those priorities change. And so what we're trying to do is create a mechanism that's going to kind of lock the state into a path going forward, right? So, for example, there was a temporary pause on federal funding. I'm just, a little leeway here to go through those funding. And so things already came up and said, look, we got to start cutting back on our appropriations. We have to start cutting back on some of the funding for programs that are not core services or were deemed core services. And so our thought is, for some folks, climate mitigation and resiliency projects are not core services. And so we're trying to say that if we have a dedicated stream of revenue that could possibly put into a special fund that you could, possibly bond off of and increase and have a way to have that, funding year after year and consistently move forward on projects, then that would be the best case forward based on the need for, that was identified in the FSRI report and from the Climate Advisory Team's report.
I mean, I guess I just still have questions because it's like the executive branch and the governor is the, boss of DLNR, of DBET, of Department of Health, of the Climate Commission, of the Energy Office, of OPSD. Why not, if there's a desire to do things differently and prioritize differently, bring everyone together who already works for the administration and work on it that way? This just seems, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm as the chair of this committee, often feel frustrated with how other things get prioritized over environmental issues. They're all important things, of course, but I don't know that I'm on board with taking all the decision-making out of the hands of the legislature.
Sure, and we're open to that discussion. This is a process we put forward. We kind of modeled it loosely after like HHFDC, where the legislature appropriates a set amount of money, right, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. There's a process where applications are received, there's a vetting, and then those awards are made. And it's very transparent, and there's a criteria and all those things. And so that's the goal we were trying to set up. As far as going back to your other idea about why we can't do this with our existing structure, as you know, right, we will work together, and the Department of Defense will be able to collaborate and coordinate these things. But ultimately, the legislature decides with the separation of powers where the money is going to go. And so if we put in the executive budget request, and there's competing priorities too, but ultimately we have to execute what the legislature appropriates.
Well, how much is the estimated revenue from the interest? Well, it's two separate bills, but from the TAT.
The TAT, so 1.75% would generate approximately, give or take, about $180 million. And so we're proposing
Per year.
Per year, correct? Yes. And then the other one, well, we'll talk about the next bill, but and then those would be separate, bifurcated to the two special funds, and then.
And we can talk about it now, because I think they're largely similar or related.
Sure.
What is the revenue for the interest?
So in HB 1076, right, so it's looking at the EBRF, the Rainy Day Fund, and right now that has about a $1.5 billion sitting there. And so what we're saying is we don't want to touch the principal. That does a lot of great things for us, provides emergency relief that if we need to tap that. It also helps with our credit rating and all that. But it does generate significant interest every year, give or take $40 to $60 million of interest. And so right now, it's like a savings account. It just kind of sits there, and that's good. But is there ways that we can make use of our money better? And the big thing is that, I think someone brought up that tourists don't have unlimited funds, right? And absolutely true. But neither do our local residents. And so one of the mandates that we looked at from Governor was how can we increase this funding stream, a dedicated funding stream, without significantly impacting our residents? And so we're trying to put together different ideas. One is an increase of the TAT, one is the scrape of the rainy day fund interest, and then, into these funds and possibly bonding and, capitalize on those.
And then you're aware there's been a push for the TAT mechanism to be used for what we call the green fees bill, which would be dedicated funding for DLNR, which is, I think, much more specific in terms of our understanding of how it would be used for what kind of projects and, where it's going.
Right.
So
I'm sorry.
You support this over that?
No, we don't support this over that. So the environmental stewardship fee that's proposed this year under DLNR is looking at a visitor fee, right, where they can go through anyone that wants to enter state parks, trails, beaches.
I think there's also a TAT version. There's both.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the admin bill package.
Okay,
My apologies.
okay. All right. I
But
know
from the
other people
admin's
also have
point of
versions.
view, there's that fee.
I mean, what do you really envision that we're gonna do all that in 1 year? Raise the TAT, implement a stewardship fee, and scrape the interest?
Again, I think that's the prioritization is determined by the legislature. But we would say, the governor, the climate advisory team had come out with, I think it was like, 500 million or several options, right? Many hundreds of millions. Governor came up with, look, at the very least, we need to do $200 million a year, every year, to start addressing these impacts. And so if we don't put together some, mechanisms, kind of working them together, we won't reach that. And I don't think we're going to be able to do it in our current structure of financing.
Well, I have some questions about the the tourism aspects of it, but I think I'll leave it. I bet Rep. Quinlan has similar questions, so I'll leave it to him.
Members, any other questions? Rep. Quinlan.
What does the Economic Development and Revitalization Special Fund do?
So this would be directed into, and one of the testifiers made a good point way back when that the TAT was designed to build the convention center. But now it's used for a variety of purposes. And what we're saying is that a portion of this fee should be redirected back into tourism areas, resort districts, all those things to cover infrastructure, marketing costs, and anything that, that are related to those areas, because they are the economic drivers for our state.
Is it a 50-50 split between the two funds?
It is.
So HTA is going to get its TAT back?
So it's not HTA, so we've established.
marketing,
Sorry?
But marketing.
Right, but, so this is not under HTA, this is under the DBED director, and there's a process that's described here that talks about the process that we set up with a separate group, because it's not just marketing, but it's looking at holistically the tourism and resort districts. So there's a lot of infrastructure projects, there's a lot of money the state has been putting into those projects, and so everything has to be looked at as a whole.
So is there a potential that marketing dollars would be expended both directly by DBED and also by HTA concurrently?
Right now, the bill does not specify that HTA has an authority. HTA has an advisory authority. So HTA, OPSD, and I believe DLNR has a mechanism that provides input to this to this group that's set up, and then ultimately the governor then makes the final decision.
I guess my fear is that we would end up with potentially two different marketing campaigns, or, I mean, HTA's mandate, I think, is pretty clear. I think that's where we have a lot of our state expertise housed in that agency. I know it's early days, and I know this is just the beginning of a much broader conversation, but I would feel a lot more comfortable if we are going to expend marketing dollars, that they be expended by the Tourism Authority.
Sure. So I would say, and I would let Director speak for himself, but I mean, right now, HTA, with the changes made by the legislature in recent years about the governance structure of HTA and DBED, so this falls under the DBED director directly. So the director now kind of is overseeing and as we've seen, walking through those and coordinating those efforts. So again, I don't want to speak for the director here, but I think that was the genesis behind putting it with where it is instead of with HTA.
When you guys talk about special infrastructure projects, I know that there's a lot of heartache right now in Waikiki in terms of sand loss, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we'd been talking about informally over the past few months was some sort of long-term resilience plan, whether that's sand pushing, groins, for the health of Waikiki's beaches, which are, such a huge economic driver, but something that's permanent so that they don't have to constantly come back to the legislature, so that the hotels there would have confidence on a 20 or 30-year outlook, that there would be monies available, that the sand would be addressed on a, not necessarily an annual basis, but, on 5, 10, 15-year plan sort of a thing. I mean, is that what we're potentially talking about?
I mean, that's part of it, absolutely, right? So it's things that are going to enhance and provide resiliency in those areas. And that specifically came up in some of the meetings we've had with the tourism folks. And besides, and I would say this also, right? Waikiki is a great example. It's maybe an easy example also. But, the other consideration is the neighbor islands that may receive, the resort areas in those areas may receive less direct appropriations and funding. And so this would be a way to kind of create a little sense of equity in looking out, how that can be deployed statewide.
And I guess just one last thought, Chair Lowen, if I could. I think I'm also confused about who is going to decide how and when and where to expend these funds. I don't know that it's completely clear in the current iteration of this bill, so I think that's a concern.
Sure, we can work on that.
Thank you. Members, Rep. Kush.
Thank you. My question's for Department of Taxation. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, this, what Kona Kohala Chamber of Commerce brought up is a recurring question that I hear a lot, and it's the law. We're leaving money on the table in our taxation, and we're raising taxes to basically cover losses that we don't collect. Do you have an idea or strategy to kind of close that gap between, especially with relation to short-term vacation rentals, of collecting that TAT where it might not be collected? Do you have any ideas?
Well, first of all, if it's a short-term vacation rental, then yes, they are subject to the transit accommodations tax, and everyone should be paying. So we're not, if we're aware of someone that's not paying, then yeah, we're doing enforcement against them. We have a special enforcement unit within our department, and one of the sectors that they specifically focus on are vacation rentals. So, anyone out there aware of people violating the law, certainly welcome to make a complaint to us, and we will definitely look into it. But yeah, even if you're aware of just a neighborhood where you suspect there are a lot of illegal rental, or not even illegal, because even if it's illegal, they still got to pay us tax. So whether they're legal or not, if they're just not paying the applicable tax, then yes, please report it to us and we will look into it.
Okay, have you guys ever done any enforcement actions on Hawaii Island?
Oh, I'm sure we have. I don't have the data, but we do it statewide.
Because clearly there's a big gap based on the numbers of these trawlers that, data trawl the numbers on short-term vacation rentals available and what we collect.
It sounds like, it's going to be based, well, it depends on how accurate that data is, right?
Sure.
Is it based on speculation? Certain assumptions are being made? I really don't think anybody really knows. So.
Okay. But so yours is just like a resident complaining and calls you folks. That's the only way you don't have any
well, not the only way.
program to seek out?
Well, like I said, we have a special enforcement section, and they have ways. So we do, we do monitor the advertisements that come up, make sure they're compliant with the law. And then, of course, yes, we do take leads from various sources. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we're going to move on to the next measure. House Bill 1076, relating to state funds, establishes a Climate Mitigation and Resiliency Special Fund, mandates the allocation of all earned interest from the Emergency and Budget Reserve Fund to the newly established special fund, appropriates funds. The first to testify is, again, the Office of the Governor in support in person.
So, Chair, we'll stand on a written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Luke Myers from the Hawaii Office of the Governor Recovery and Resiliency Unit in support on Zoom.
Chairs, Luke Myers, Recovery and Resiliency Branch Chief, standing our testimony in support, available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Emma Ewan, DLNR, in support in person. Thank you. We have testimony in support from DOD, Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, and we have the Hawaii State Energy Office in support in person.
The Energy Office stands on its testimony in support. Happy to answer your question.
Thank you. We have the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support in person. Thank you. We have the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development in support. Next, we have Climate Advisory Team, Kavika Riley, in support in person.
Stand on their testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Tax Foundation of Hawaii with comments on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We will stand on written testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have testimony in support from Ku'aina Ulo Awamo, my apologies, in support Hawaii Land Trust, in support Propomaya Foundation, in support Coalition Earth, in support Climate Protectors Hawaii, in support in person.
We'll stand on our written testimony.
Thank you. Care for Aina Now Coalition, in support in person.
Aloha Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Prusso, and House members of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. Mahalo for this opportunity to share my mana'o with you. My name is Malka Gibson, and I was born and raised in Ewa Beach, but I now live on the windward side in beautiful Kaneohe. I am a Kanaka Oiwi, Yonsei fourth generation Chinese and fifth generation Japanese and fifth generation Chinese Manawahine. I'm a program officer at Resources Legacy Fund, where I develop and implement strategies and projects for our Hawaii environmental equity and justice programs. Resources Legacy Fund is a nonprofit and philanthropic organization, and locally we partner with community-based organizations to promote natural and cultural resource protection and restoration. I'm testifying in support of HB 1076 on behalf of Resources Legacy Fund and the Care for Aina Now Coalition. What is most important about HB 1076 is that it increases funding for natural resource protection. We currently have a funding gap of $560 million annually, and this measure will go a long way towards addressing it. This critical funding is needed for land management, stream restoration, mitigation, climate disasters, wildfire prevention, and so much more. I became even more convinced that it is our obligation to ensure the health and safety of our keiki and our aina after having one of my own. In conclusion, I wanted to share one of my favorite olelo no eau, make no ke kakalo ola ika pilili. The taro may die, but lives on in its young plants it produces. One lives on in its children. Mahalo.
Thank you. In addition to the testimony already provided, we have the testimony of 2 individuals in support and 2 in opposition. Is there anyone in the room who would like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? No questions? Okay, excellent. Moving on to House Bill 1459. Relating to sustainable aviation fuel, sets standards for sustainable aviation fuel adoption for interstate travel by certain times, appropriates funds. First to testify, we have the AG's office with comments on Zoom. Not present. In person. Sorry.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Deputy Attorney General Margie Lau. We have provided our written comments concerning federal preemption of the provisions under this bill under the Federal Clean Air Act. I'm available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to testify, we have Alaska Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines in opposition in person.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair members, Jacob Aki on behalf of Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines. We do stand on our written comments, but did want to provide some thoughts. We agree with some of the testimony that was shared regarding the federal preemption conversation, but we also wanted to highlight that, while we appreciate the intent of, of the bill, our main concern is that SAF is currently limited, and any premature mandate would really create a financial and logistical burden, and instead we would encourage incentive-based solutions such as those that were proposed in House Bill 976. We remain committed to working with the state, and we are available for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Additionally, we have testimony in support from Coalition Earth, in opposition from Airlines for America, in support from Blue Planet Hawaii, testimony with comments from 12BC, Technology Innovation Organization, testimony in opposition from the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party, and 1 individual testifying in support. Correct? Is there anyone who would like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Chair Lowen.
I guess for Alaska, based on conversations that we've had about this regarding the other bill that you referenced,
Yep.
I think it was my understanding that the sustainable aviation fuel is basically a drop-in replacement so that it doesn't require altering the engines
Correct.
or equipment or anything. So, because I think that was raised in the Attorney General's testimony, but just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so SAF is a drop in fuel, but the current standard is that for SAF, it would require a up to 50% mix. So we would still have to mix it with conventional jet fuel, but only at a 50% blend. Our concern is that if this bill does move forward and we do get to a point to where we have to do 100% SAF, we're not sure if the federal regulations would allow for a 100% blend. Currently, it is 50%. Our hope is that as time moves on, we can move closer and closer to 100% SAF, but that current blend cap is still in place.
And what about the 10% by 2030 goal? Is that attainable?
Yeah, I mean, the industry is still committed to trying to attain 3 billion gallons of cost-competitive SAF by 2030. We are working not just here in the state, but across the country to try to spur production at both the state and federal level. So it's a goal that we are still working toward, and that's why we believe that if we're able to start to produce SAF, if the incentives are in place for the producers to start SAF, we can get there. Obviously, for many reasons, not just here, it is a challenge to really get the production up and going. But our collective industry is working hard to try to make sure that we at least get there.
Yeah, I guess I would view this as something that could go hand in hand with the tax credit bill. Like if we're going to offer that kind of incentive, then having an expectation to meet certain goals.
Yeah, but I
Seems
would
reasonable, but I get that the 100% might not be.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
the other concern with any state level mandate or requirement would be that federal preemption, right? So we would definitely be willing to work in to see if there's some voluntary opt-in goals. We've done some of that in other states, but any state mandate to reach a certain limit would follow under federal preemption.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Quickly for the Attorney General. If it's, as the bill says, it's interstate travel and it doesn't require the modification of equipment or operations, as was presented in the testimony as kind of the factor that would make this run afoul of federal law or court cases, like would it be something we would have authority to do to set a goal in state law?
So I think the first question was if it was limited because it's intrastate. Our view is that because the Federal Clean Air Act applies nationally, it would apply to this as well. So that the intrastate limitation here wouldn't change that.
But with this, with the understanding that it's a drop-in fuel replacement that doesn't require modifying the equipment.
Right. So I think when we looked at guidance from the federal cases, the federal case that we looked at, I understand, like you're saying, that it may not change the actual engine, but it does go to the operation of the engine, the maintenance, and so our view is that it would focus on the engine itself. I think that's the case that we had looked at. It wasn't really as
Well, I
directed
think
to the engine.
why I just asked that question of Alaska Airlines, it sounds like it doesn't impact that. I mean, unless you know something about engine mechanics.
No, and I don't.
More than
for
they
sure,
do.
no.
Okay.
I think our just view is that because it is going into the engine and it's affecting the operation of the engine, that would be it. But I don't profess to know the intricacies.
Right. So if you instead of making that assumption, if we make the assumption based on what the testimony was that it's a drop-in replacement fuel up to certain percentages, right? Not up to 100%, but up to adding in smaller percentages that requires no modification of anything, then we would have the jurisdiction to be able to impose these goals.
I am not able to make that conclusion right now. I think you still look at that it will be saying an emission standard, but and that takes you back to what is it affecting, the engine or something else. So.
But if it's not affecting the engine.
And I guess that's maybe where I guess the fuel would affect the engine, but I think there's differing views evidently. So that's our view is that it may be subject to preemption.
Okay, but I guess what I'm asking you is not your opinion on whether it would affect the engine or not, but let's assume hypothetically it does not affect the engine. Then the state does have jurisdiction. I'm just trying to understand what you guys laid out in your testimony.
If someone has determined, if there's a determination that does not affect the engine, then under the interpretations of the law, then that would be something that may not be subject to preemption.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next measure, which is House Bill 790. relating to renewable energy, establishes an installation goal for customer-sited distributed energy resources in the state, ensures that fair compensation is provided to distributed energy resources exports as part of the grid services program, authorizes retail wheeling of renewable energy, and requires the PUC to establish policies and procedures to implement retail wheeling and microgrid service tariffs. First to testify, we have Michael Angelo from DCCA with comments in person.
Morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Peruso, members of the committee. My name is Michael Angelo. I'm the Executive Director, Division of Consumer Advocacy. We stand on our testimony, providing written comments available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Public Utilities Commission with comments in person.
Chair, PUC will stand on its written testimony providing comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii State Energy Office in support in person.
The Energy Office stands on our testimony with public comments.
I'll change that. Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support in person. Thank you. Then we have Hawaiian Electric in opposition in person.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Kaiulani Shinsato on behalf of Hawaiian Electric. While we definitely agree with the intent of this bill, which is supposed to incentivize distributed energy resources in Hawaii, we do respectfully oppose the bill. I'd like to expand on just a couple of points that I made in my written testimony. The first one has to do with retail crediting on exported energy in grid services programs. This is currently a live issue before the Public Utilities Commission. The parties to that proceeding that the commission opened up, they include Hawaiian Electric, the Consumer Advocates Office, the solar industry. We just recently filed briefs on this issue. A couple of weeks ago, we had a technical conference just last week, and we're about to file another round of briefs next week. So it's not just on that issue too, it's on several other potential ways we can improve our grid services program right now called Bring Your Own Device, or BYOD. So it's a complicated matter. Our strong recommendation is that we keep this before the PUC. They're the right body to determine the issue at a holistic level, and they're already on top of it. So a second point I wanted to make has to do with the goal of 50,000 new rooftop systems by 2030. We definitely agree with that goal and the intent behind it. But we did already implement that goal as a part of our climate action plan and integrated grid plan. And I'm happy to say that we are tracking to it, and we definitely plan to meet it by 2030. So our recommendation is to kind of stick to that path that we've already laid out, and at this time, no need to legislate. Thank you. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Next to testify, we have, we have Sunrun, Inc. With testimony in support, then IBEW Local 1260 in opposition in person. Thank you. Testimony in support from Fotonwan's Works Engineering, Credence Projects LLC, Energy Advisors LLC, Life of the Land, offer testimony in opposition in person.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Peruso, members of the committee. Henry Curtis, Life of the Land. First, we find the word fair to be fairly incorrect in the bill. Fair should be determined by the Public Utilities Commission. They have an open docket on it. Second, we have been involved in dockets that involve wheeling issues, and the PUC has an open docket looking at wheeling between government entities, which is the proper vehicle first to determine if there's unfair subsidies or cross-subsidization. That docket has to be completed before we can look at retail wheeling. Thank you. We oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next, we have Kauai Island Utility Cooperative in opposition on Zoom.
Yes, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. This is Beth Amaro from KIUC. We stand on our testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Enphase Energy offered testimony in support. We have Hawaii Solar Energy Association in support in person.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Peruso, and committee members. I'm Rocky Mold with the Hawaii Solar Energy Association. I just want to say we'll stand on our testimony in strong support of this measure. We're very excited about this 50,000 target. We think it's really going to motivate policymakers to come up with the right policies to achieve that very ambitious but achievable target. So we're very excited about that. And I'll note that the Public Utilities Commission recently issued inclinations on January 31st, and they they do it in a different way, but they agree with that 50,000 target by setting a target for 400 megawatts of DERs by 2030. That essentially is the same target as a 50,000 target. So yeah, and the key here in this bill really is the language that says that we need sufficiently designed programs with the right structures and compensation rates to achieve that ambitious target. So we're very excited about this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Holoho Energy in support in person. Not present. We also have the testimony of 7 individuals in support. Is there anyone who would like to provide additional testimony on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Hawaii State Energy Office?
I just want to clarify, our position was in support of the elements for the 50,000 additional distributed energy resources consistent with Executive Order 2501, but we did have cautionary comments about the witness.
Thank you for that clarification. Seeing no further conversation, we're going to move on to House Bill 1495. Relating to the Keauhou Aquifer System, appropriates funds to the Department of Land and Natural Resources to install 2 monitoring wells in the Keauhou Aquifer System, establishes the Keauhou Aquifer System Monitoring Program, requires reports to the legislature. First to testify on this measure is the Department of Land and Natural Resources in support in person.
Aloha Kakahiaka, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Kira Kahahane, Deputy Director of the Commission on Water Resource Management. I'll keep my comments brief. We submitted written testimony in strong support of this bill with suggested amendments. The Commission on Water Resource Management is committed to the responsible management of the Keauhou Aquifer System, which necessarily includes monitoring, community outreach, and ongoing study. Our suggested amendments will provide a vehicle for organizing those ongoing efforts and a reliable source of funding to support our staff. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. We also have the testimony of DBET in support and the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii Authority, NAHA, in support. Is there anyone else who would like to provide testimony on this measure? Please come up to the podium.
Dean Minakami, Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation. I believe we submitted testimony, but we are in support of this measure. Since 2016, we've been trying to develop a water source along with NELHA for NELHA's operations as well as our own master plan community. And those efforts have been stalled due to concerns about the impact of new water sources on the Keauhou Aquifer System. So we're in strong support of this measure as this may help to address those concerns.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next measure, House Bill 1020. Relating to a program to characterize carbon sequestration potential and underground water resources statewide, it establishes a statewide underground water and carbon sequestration resource characterization program via slim hole borers and related statewide environmental assessment. First to testify on this measure is DBET in support. Actually not present, but they did submit that testimony. The Hawaii State Energy Office in support in person.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Mark Lick, Chief Energy Officer for the Hawaii State Energy Office. We stand by our testimony in strong support of House Bill 1020, but I simply wanted to point out that rarely has the legislature had an opportunity to take a decisive action on energy self-sufficiency like they do with this measure, which provides adequate research to identify the location and the quantity of geothermal resources throughout the islands, which is sorely lacked right now. We simply don't know precisely where the geothermal resources are. And we believe it's part of a two-step process that does involve community engagement, which we're already conducting to ensure it's appropriately done and done with full cooperation and support of communities where they so determine. But we also need to know where the resource is. And the $36 million that is being, or $33 million that's being requested over the two biennium budget periods will adequately identify that and give us the best chance for greater energy self-sufficiency. But happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next to testify, we have Board of Water Supply with comments on Zoom or in person.
Yes, Kathy Mitchell with the Board of Water Supply. We submitted testimony offering comments. And Barry Usagawa may be on Zoom. I'm not sure he was having problems. Perfect. If you have any questions, I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. Next, we have Ulupono Initiative in support in person. Thank you. We'll stand on our written testimony. Thank you. We also have testimony from individuals, 2 in support and 2 in opposition on this measure. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure?
Henry Curtis, Life of Land, and I'll submit writing following this. I believe we have known for decades where the sources are. What we don't know is the strength of the sites and the cost to recover from those sites. But we have adequate documents on where the sources are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, are there any questions? Chair Lowen.
Thank you. I guess Energy Office? I guess kind of following up on what Henry Curtis just said and what we often hear said about geothermal, which is that people who want to see development of this resource move forward are tired of more studies. Can you just tell us in more detail? I mean, first of all, the $3 million that has already been allocated, what has that been spent on or planned to be spent on? And then this additional funding, like at the end of it, when it's all expended, what will we have to show for it? Will we finally have that information that's needed to be able to take it out to developers and have someone look at actually moving forward on a project proposal and building out a resource?
Thank you, Chair. I deeply appreciate what Life of the Land mentioned about identifying or being able to understand, and I would say in a very broad way, where rift zones are, where calderas are, where there are likely sources of energy. And I would say in Pune District, in a few locations where wells have been drilled, we know, have a greater idea of that. But in terms of the quantity, again, I agree very strongly that understanding the quantity, the size of the water resources, the heat of these water resources, typically it takes many drilling sites to be able to adequately understand multiple water sources that are used to balance a typical geothermal development. And typically, and what we've seen here quite clearly, is that developers nor the Public Utilities Commission nor Hawaiian Electric, I believe, have adequate understanding of where enough of these resources could be done with through the idea of solicitations to garner power purchase agreements, that there's not enough confidence to move aggressively forward on that. So we haven't seen geothermal development. And we've heard from developers that they're not willing to make essentially.
Sure. I guess the question though is, what's been done with the $3 million?
Okay.
I know that was to HCDC, and
Right.
You guys have been working together. And then with this additional funding, what do you envision when it's all done? Will we have the answers finally to those questions that you're talking about?
So
or will this just be
the current
one small step?
The legislature provided last session what is ended up to be $3 million left after the governor's veto of half of that. There's $3 million that went to DBED. And in addition to that, there was $5 million provided by the governor to the Energy Office. Each slim hole well, it costs roughly $5 million. And so the Energy Office is pursuing a test well on Maui that we hope to conduct that research by the end of the year, actually conduct the research. And with DBED, they have, to my understanding, established a contract with a vendor to do work on the Big Island on DHHL property. I think they could provide more details on precisely what the consultant is going to do. But again, from those two efforts, certainly I can speak to the Energy Office effort. We will have sometime early next year research data on that particular test site. The idea is that, again, we can't tell you precisely what the answers will be, but the potential answers are hundreds of potential megawatts of energy, which could have a profound effect. That could mean 100% renewable energy on each of the islands where those resources are found. And that is extremely profound. That would be an enormous windfall in terms of the tax revenue from that, the ability to eliminate oil price volatility, which is hundreds of millions of dollars of cost to ratepayers.
I know, yeah, I think, at least for me, maybe not all the members, but I mean, I'm on board. I just want to know that I want to just understand how many more studies until, I mean, I know that it depends on the result of the study, but, you know, when we have an answer, a yes or no answer, at least at one location, right?
So
I mean, obviously, there's more locations, but at these two locations that you mentioned.
We believe that in order to have the probability of success, in order to have enough research data to be able to, we don't believe that any individual well may be successful. So it's going to take multiple wells to increase the probability of success. And we're looking at places that are likely known, you know, that are highly believed to be places where you can find that. But as we've heard from the Groundwater and Geothermal Resource Center, they've often drilled wells in places that are supposedly known to be successful and have hit dry wells. So until you do that, you really won't know. And we believe that it will take 6 or 8 wells to bear fruit. And so we believe that is a worthy investment by the state, given the upside potential.
And this funding in this bill is enough for that number of wells at each of these locations, or what does it cover?
Yeah, again, it's roughly $5 million per well, so that means that we could drill 6 wells, and if, again, depending on how effective the drilling is and when success is met at what depth, it could be a few more. So it could be 6 to 8, potentially, again, given the guidance that we've gotten from the Groundwater and Geothermal Resource Center, which is advising us and helping direct us on this effort.
And part of the funding was also for an environmental assessment of the impacts of these wells, I believe.
Well, it has to account for all the things that are necessary in order to do that type of research. So we wanted to make sure that there was enough outreach with the local communities as well as the environmental assessments to make sure it was done correctly. And in some of these cases, we're treading new ground. So whether it's on private land or on government land, there are different rules. And what we're also trying to do is create some continuity in the rulemaking process by being able to answer questions and work with those jurisdictions to make sure that this is much smoother done in the future.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? Rep. Kush.
Just a quick one. Thank you. So $33 million, 6 to 8 wells, maybe less, maybe more. And I know, were some of these planned on DHHL land?
We haven't specified where those would be conducted. They would just simply, except to say that they would be in high probability areas on either rift zones or within calderas that are highly likely of success. So we'll look at all of the landowners and identify which would be the most advantageous and beneficial to the state.
Okay, and then, so let's say a successful test well is found, that data is provided, and it has a high probability, and it can go forward for power purchase agreement, and it's on private land or another entity that would get benefit. Would there be any recouping, amortization return to the state on those monies expended, or is just taking risk off the table?
As it's currently defined, there's nothing in the bill to precipitate a repayment of this particular funding to identify the source. That could be accomplished. We believe that there will be ample return, again, through the economic development of the development phase, and very difficult to sort of upfront recover those costs for this part of the investment.
Sure, no, understood. So you think it'll be through GET or other tax mechanisms on the public utility side?
Yes, plus from the developers, and I believe our office and the commission and others can help create guidelines for the appropriate way for geothermal development and what the return ought to be from the development phase. So that would be, adding value back either to the communities in some form through community benefits programs, but we do expect to get information from our discussions with the community on what the appropriate mechanisms that ought to be built into later phases. And I think that's a wonderful question about making sure that adequate value comes back to the state and to the communities.
Thank you.
With no further questions, we're going to move on to the next measure, House Bill 349, relating to renewable energy, requires the Hawaii State Energy Office to conduct a statewide environmental assessment for and subsequently administer a slim hole resource characterization program, requires reports to the legislature. First to testify on this measure is Hawaii State Energy Office. In support, in person.
Mark Lake for the Energy Office. We stand on our testimony in support with the preference for the administration bill, which we just heard, but also support that if funds are allocated appropriately.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaiian Electric in support in person. Hawaiian Electric stands on its testimony in support. Thank you. Mahalo. Next, we have Ulupono Initiative in support in person. Thank you. Ulupono will stand on its testimony in support. Thank you so much. In addition to that testimony, we have one individual in opposition and 5 individuals offering testimony in support. Is there anyone else who would like to offer testimony? Mr. Curtis.
Again, Henry Curtis, Life of the Land. I apologize for not having it in writing, and I'll submit something. Lava is a state resource, and therefore accessing lava triggers an environmental assessment.
Thank you. Seeing no additional testifiers, members, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next measure, which is House Bill 1307, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, appropriates funds to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands for water well development for geophysical investigation, exploration, and identification of geothermal resources on Hawaiian homelands. First to testify, we have DHHL in support in person.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Collie Watson with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. This particular bill, we're asking for about $20 million to continue the process. Previously, under Act 205, you folks provided us with about $500,000 to do a preliminary study. We've done that. We've expended the money. Now we're moving on to the next step, which is primarily to conduct drilling of slim holes. We have 3 sites, South Point, Kauai High and Humu'ula. We've identified areas that we think might be most viable regarding this continuing investigation to collect geophysical data, as well as whether water well development is appropriate. We'd also like to hire some consultants to provide the assistance and guidance regarding what is the best way to proceed. Obviously, the bottom line with our initiative here is to generate not only alternate energy, but more importantly, funding for our program. We have over 29,000 on our wait list. The majority of our lands are on the Big Island. We do have projects in play, but again, to eliminate our wait list, we're going to need about $6 billion. So this is one potential approach to generate money besides energy for the community at large. If you have any questions on technical, I do have staff here to answer any technical questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Hawaiian Electric in support in person. Thank you. Additionally, we have testimony in support from Sustainable Energy Hawaii, Ulupono Initiative, along with 2 individuals in support and 1 in opposition. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, one moment, because I just noticed that actually we have 1 individual. Okay, so not on Zoom. Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Rep. Kush.
Chair Watson. So your preliminary research and the funds allocated prior indicated there was geothermal resources in these locations?
Yes, definitely. There's 3 primary sites, Kauai High, Humu'ula, as well as South Point, or Ka'u.
Okay. And then there's also the angle of water development as well?
Yeah, the water obviously is involved. We need to address those issues too. Water is always a big thing with our programs. Without it, we can't do our developments.
Okay, and have you had any coordination with the State Energy Office on, you know, these couple bills obviously are all trying to address the same thing. Yours in particular has the added benefit to address other needs.
Yes, we have. We've worked closely with Mark Lick, along with Nicole Lautz with the Geothermal Resource Center. And the coordination, including identifying the most viable sites, we've been active in working with them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next measure, which is House Bill 932 relating to green bonds, establishes a green bonds working group within the Department of DBET. First to testify is the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development with comments in person. Not present. Next to testify is Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support in person. Thank you so much. We also have testimony from Climate Protectors of Hawaii and Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support, Coalition Earth in support, Hawaii Food Plus Policy in support, and 1 individual in opposition. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next measure, House Bill 461. Relating to commuting, requires the Director of Human Resources Development in consultation with the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission, State Energy Office, and Department of Accounting and General Services to develop and implement a comprehensive commuting choice benefit program for all state employees regardless of mode of transportation, requires a report to the legislature. The first to testify on this measure is the department, is DAGS with comments, and they are not present. We also have testimony from DHERD with comments in person. Thank you. We have comments from Hawaii State Energy Office in support in person.
Energy Office stands testimony in support.
Thank you. We have testimony from Leigh Laramie from the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission in support on Zoom, not present. And we have testimony in support from Kiana Otsuka of Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization in support in person. Hi.
Hi. Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Kiana Otsuka, and I'm with the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization. So we want to stand in support of the bill. And I just want to note for the committee quickly that we helped to lead the study, which we're calling our State Government Employee Transportation Demand Management Study. That's in alignment with this bill. I'm happy to answer questions about the study. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Additionally, we have 4 individuals providing testimony in support. Is there anyone who would like to provide additional testimony on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Chair Lowen.
I guess for Ampo, oh, you're hiding behind the podium. I mean, I'm just curious because I like this idea, and we had a similar resolution last year, but is there not a way to do it without a big appropriation and 2 FTEs? Because it just seems like a lot.
You're asking if there's a way to do it without the 2 FTEs?
Yeah, I mean, just to provide bus passes, or to figure out a way to make it more equitable between the subsidy that is provided for parking versus the subsidy that's provided for bus passes.
Yeah, so part of this study was sort of talking story and collaborating with the Department of Human Resources Development, as well as the Department of Accounting General Services, again, in partnership with the Hawaii State Energy Office. And in conversations with those folks, they've identified the need for staff support to implement these measures. I also noted in our testimony, we're recommending fully subsidized transit passes for state employees, bike share passes, as well as a parking cash-out program. And these will all require an appropriation from the legislature, again, as well as support staff to sort of plan and implement based on conversations with the implementing agencies. So I guess in short, I don't think so.
Okay. What if you just made parking more expensive?
That's an option. I still think they probably need some staff support to do that. The other recommendation we had for this study in general suggested increasing the cost of employee parking, as well as doing employee stall share, and also talked story with DAGs about that, and they said that that would require staff support as well. But that could help fund some of the other benefits we're recommending as part of this study.
Okay. Was someone here from DAGs? No.
No.
Or I guess DHERD? No. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was getting text messages. So, I mean, just same question. Why 2 FTEs just to figure out how to make it more equitable between the amount that we subsidize parking for employees versus bus passes? It seems like a lot.
Well, currently, we only have 3 positions within our benefits office, but to implement additional programs, we're going to need staff support to provide, I guess, to if we need to amend rules or develop the program and the education of it to the departments, we're going to need staff support because we handle other pre-tax benefit programs as well.
But what if you don't have to amend the rules, or you just offer offer a different benefit? You know, we don't fund it. I mean, it's just as challenging to, as you know, to authorize for the legislature to find funding to authorize all these positions. And
yes,
every other bill that we hear has additional positions in it, and I just starting to feel like some of these things fall under the job of the agency. And maybe there's a way to uncomplicate it a little bit. Like, it is additional work, but maybe there's a way to just implement it in a simpler way.
It's additional work, and to do the research on how much, because we wouldn't know how much to offer these, like for the transit subsidies, we're going to have to go out and see whether the city would allow us to have free bus passes. We can't subsidize it. We have no funding for it. And to do the research and develop the program, and then we may have to go out for consultation with the unions as well. So there's all these different
I
layers.
think the issue,
in
though,
order.
is that the parking, it's like the parking is already subsidized. I mean, it might not be through appropriation, but just through what's charged for it. It's not market rate.
But we're gonna, for bus pass and bike sharing, we're gonna have to subsidize it because there's no funding. I mean, we would have to pay bike Biki for the passes, and we're gonna have to pay the city or any county transportation for the passes. I don't think they would give it to us for free, but.
Well, no, I understand that. The deductions for parking, where do those get deposited to? Is that just a general fund? It just, because it's
That gets
payroll?
paid through DAGs. I don't know if it's a special fund or if it's a general fund, but those are all employee paid, and then we can pre-tax it based on the IRS regulations. So anything subsidized where the employer is going to pay for something, those aren't, we're not going to be able to pre-tax it. So there's additional costs, and it would be considered income for the employee who gets that pass.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking of it like, if parking was more expensive, wouldn't that create incentive to switch to other forms of transit? And that would just be like a trade-off in terms of what the cost is.
That could be, but we don't control the parking rate.
Yeah, I get that. But that's a part of the problem. Well, just because it feels like a subsidy and additional appropriation because the subsidy of the parking is sort of baked in. We don't separately do an appropriation for it. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions, members? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our last measure. House Bill 982 relating to wildfires establishes a wildfire recovery fund, allows securitization for electric utilities. First to testify, we have Office of the Governor with comments, not here. Next, we have the Attorney General with comments on Zoom or in person.
Good morning.
Morning.
Deputy Attorney General Randall Nishiyama. I'm here on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General. We've submitted our written comments, and we're available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have DCCA with comments in person. Thank you. We have additional testimony from Michael Angelo from DCCA. Thank you. Public Utilities Commission with comments in person.
Stand on the written testimony providing comments.
Mahalo. Next, we have the Climate Advisory Team in support, Kalailoa Partners in support, Plus Power in support, Ulupono Initiative in support in person.
Thank you. We'll stand on our written testimony in support, offering a couple comments for consideration.
Thank you. We have the Hawaii Insurers Council in opposition, IBEW offering testimony in support in person.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, IBEW 1260 stands in strong support, and we have our business manager, George, if there's any questions.
Mahalo. Next, we have Hawaii Cattlemen's Council in support, Life of the Land with comments in person.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. This bill proposes that ratepayers are on the hook for $1 billion. Even in California, ratepayers are only on the hook for half of it. But Hawaiian Electric believes that ratepayers should be on the hook for 99.5% of the costs. That is just plain crazy. The second issue is a cost shift. If ratepayers are paying in now to build this billion-dollar fund, and it sits unused for 200 years, and then it's used, it's having one set of ratepayers pay in to benefit people who are not even born yet. That is why can't it be, if it's ratepayers, why isn't it spread out over time? That as new ratepayers come on, those who have paid in get something back? It shouldn't be just one block of 5 years of ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have testimony and support from Sustainable Energy Hawaii. And then we have PAR Hawaii in support in person. On Zoom.
I'm actually on Zoom.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Eric Wright. I serve as president of PAR Hawaii. We are in support of House Bill 982. One of the benefits that this legislation would have is a positive impact on local companies like ours. We are, of course, Hawaiian Electric's fuel supplier, and so our business depends on receiving timely payments on that fuel supply. Likewise, for other companies that do business with Hawaiian Electric, like Kaliloa Partners out here in Campbell Industrial Park, they're really critical to the grid on Oahu, and their business depends on receiving timely payments from Hawaiian Electric. And of course, there's probably hundreds of contractors and other businesses in Hawaii that do business with Hawaiian Electric. And so having a healthy Hawaiian Electric is really important to our local economy, really important to a lot of people that live and work here in Hawaii. So we think this is a good measure, and we'll stand at a written testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Kauai Island Utility Cooperative on Zoom.
Hi, yes, good morning again. Beth Amaro from KIUC. We stand on our written testimony in support of this bill, and just note that we are offering 2 amendments for your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Hawaiian Electric in support in person.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Peruso, and members of the committee. My name is Jason Ben, Senior Vice President for Hawaiian Electric. I'm testifying in strong support of HB 982 relating to wildfires with proposed amendments to address comments from the AG. The bill is in the public interest. It protects both the people of Hawaii and our economy from the risk of future catastrophic wildfires. I want to emphasize strongly the bill is forward-looking. I want to make clear our company's commitment to pay its share of the global settlement with no contribution from customers. Despite immense and continuing efforts by many to reduce wildfire risk in Hawaii, including our own, no one should assume the risk is zero, and we must act now. The bill creates a wildfire recovery fund designed to achieve 3 key objectives that balance the interests of many stakeholders. First, it protects property owners, renters, and insurers, and the economy from the risk of a future catastrophic wildfire by creating a speedy process for fair compensation while preserving individuals' rights to pursue litigation. Second, it does protect customers from cost increases caused by the utility's exposure to unlimited wildfire liability, which negatively affects our cost of capital and credit rating, which in turn makes it more expensive for customers at a time when we need to make critical infrastructure improvements to address safety, reliability, resiliency, and meet the energy policy objectives of the state of Hawaii. The bill also provides a unique give-back feature to customers after 10 years if we're able to successfully execute the work to reduce risk as a society. Finally, it preserves accountability for wildfire risk mitigation. It ensures that utilities must have a PUC-accepted mitigation plan to participate in the fund. It requires shareholders to replenish the fund if they're found imprudent. So please pass HB 982. Mahalo for allowing me to testify in support of this important bill, and I invite any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mahalo for your testimony. Next, we have testimony and support from the Retail Merchants of Hawaii, from Hawaii Farm Bureau. Next, we have Chamber of Commerce Hawaii in support in person. Thank you. We also have testimony in support from Amoresco, Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii, Hawaii Island Chamber of Commerce in support, Clearway Energy Group in support in person. Thank you. Supporting the intent? Okay, supporting. Okay. We also have testimony in opposition from the Hawaii Regional Council of Carpenters, not present. We have testimony from AES Hawaii in support on Zoom, not present. Kaliloa Partners in support, not present. And PRP in opposition, also not present. We also have testimony in opposition from the Hawaii Association for Justice, In opposition, in person? Not present. Moving on. Testimony in support from the Kapolei Chamber of Commerce, from the North Kahala Community Resource Center, from Kona Kahala Chamber of Commerce, and from the Hawaii Firefighters Association. Additionally, we have testimony all in support from 16 individuals. Is there anyone else who would like to testify in this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions? Chair Lowen.
I guess Hawaiian Electric. So, I guess for starters, how did you guys decide on that cost breakdown? $1 billion for ratepayers and $5 million for Hawaiian Electric?
Thank you for the question. Let me try to address that. There's a couple of things. First of all, we cannot obtain insurance to that level. This is the cheapest alternative we can get to insurance. And insurance, like all costs of service, is paid by ratepayers through the rate-making process. So utilities don't have the ability to walk away from their duty to serve where the risks exist that may not all be within our control. So it is like all parts of our costs to produce service are part of the rate-making process. Right now, if we were to go after insurance,
Okay, I have a lot of questions
Sure.
regarding all of that. The question was,
sure.
how did you decide on the breakdown of, 99.5% ratepayers and 5% utilities?
Let's be clear. We're asking for,
contributions?
we're contributing $5 million from shareholders to establish the executive director, to establish administrative rules. Whatever residuals goes back into the fund. We are asking for approximately $4 to the average bill to pay for the cheapest form we can get to assure this risk, which is a critical step to restore our credit rating and cost of capital. Without it,
$4 on the average bill for how many years?
it's securitized for 30 years.
And then that's for residential.
Yeah.
What about commercial?
They escalate from, they would be based on usage, right? So small businesses probably closer to 6. But I want to make a very important point. We believe that we need this to reduce our credit rating and cost of capital, and that savings, when we achieve it, will more than offset the $4. It's very simple. Like, if our cost to borrow and we have to make it safe for wildfire, we have to achieve the clean energy goals, we have to make it resilient, the savings in the spread of the credit, once we're able to achieve a better credit rating, which we had A- before the fire, is going to pass on to customers. There's only two choices. Rates will go up to account for the higher credit rating. We'll get our bill, reduce credit ratings, everything will come down, or less work will be done, because we cannot afford to, within the rate structure, do the volume of work we have to do to make it safe and to achieve 2045 and the new, more aggressive goals. Like, there's not an endless pot of money. And shareholders are contributing $2 billion to our share of the settlement. People point to California, 50-50. California customers, their PUC just approved 1.6 in claims for fires that occurred before the fund. For the Thomas fire in 17, California customers are facing $5.6 billion for the Woolsey fire. And it's not apples to apples. It's completely different.
Okay. Let's circle back to the question about insurance, because you do have fire insurance outside of this proposed product.
Yes, we do.
So this is, explain to us how those two work together.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. So we have about 100.
Relatively briefly, if possible.
We have $150 million in insurance. Just to get to $500 million would cost us 35% premiums that passes to customers, and we can't even obtain it above 500. Without some level of protection against unlimited liability, we cannot raise the capital on reasonable terms to do what the state wants done and what we want done.
Is
That's
there
simple.
a scenario where we could address the liability question without creating a reserve fund?
There's 3 things we have to do. Address the physical risks. Experts have us reducing that by 60%. We have to finalize the settlement and pay for it by shareholders, $2 billion. And we have to have this bill or some form of it that doesn't hold the utility accountable to unlimited liability to fulfill its duty to serve. So this is one piece of it that's absolutely necessary. We're going to see shortly, as things play out in LA, the difference between one IOU participating in a fund and a municipal that did not. And I suspect, they're still trying to figure out what happened, but that effect on ratepayers and taxpayers if the utility in the muni was found liable is going to be far more severe to their neighbor across the street who was working was a customer of the IOU in a fund.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have a lot of other questions, so
I'm
actually,
sorry.
we'll move on. But thanks. I have some questions for the consumer advocate.
Not
and
for
we might
me.
Come back to you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Chair.
I guess so kind of similar, in your view, the breakdown of 95% versus 0.5%, 99.5 versus 0.5. Per your testimony, I think.
Roughly, right, yeah.
Yeah. Is your position it should be a 50-50 split?
Our position is the majority shouldn't fall onto ratepayers.
And then, I guess the other question, as an insurer, because this is, I think the case that HECO is making is saying, well, the cost of insurance is very high, ratepayers shoulder the cost of insurance regardless. It's rate-based, and this is a way to have cheaper. But it's a little bit different. It's kind of a new kind of insurance product.
That's right.
And how are ratepayers, they're investing in it. How do they get paid back for their investment in this if we establish such a fund? And is that adequately provided for in the bill?
In our position, no. There's no guarantee that the representation is that there's going to be an exchange where the credit rating is going to improve, and the cost to finance future infrastructure projects then would go down. That would get recovered from customers, but there's no guarantee of that. So all the risk is on the ratepayers at the moment.
How would you address it to try to? We'll have the utility pay.
With a
Pay more. Yeah.
pay more, a more equitable split.
And what about that question about, is there a way to address the limiting the liability without the reserve fund?
That's more of a legislative call, but I think you could establish caps on what was recoverable.
But that would be tougher lift, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Based on the representations that we've seen that they've provided from the credit rating agencies, a cap on the liability would help. But again, it's more of a qualitative thing from what the representations we've said. I've heard up to 60% of it is qualitative in terms of whether and to what extent the utility's credit rating is going to improve. So there's no guarantees. And our point is that there should be a shared recognition of that risk.
How much will the implementation of the wildfire mitigation plan impact the credit rating?
I don't know off the top of my head from a quantitative perspective. It will help. It's recognized as one of the factors by the credit rating agencies, but I can't give you a direct quantitative
Do you think
number.
that if there was a PIM established to reward implementation of the plan, that would also help the credit rating?
I think the utility should implement the plan regardless. It's just part of that's a critical part of their operations. Safety is priority number one, and I think the utility would agree with that.
So you don't think a PIM would be a good idea?
I don't think so. Not for this. We incentivize exceptional performance, and this is baseline performance.
Any other, while I go over my notes, other questions?
I have a quick question, but it's actually for Hawaiian Electric.
Thank you.
Hi. So I noticed in Mr. Curtis's testimony that you include language that says that the fund will be replenished should the actions of HECO prove to be imprudent. And then Mr. Henry's testimony involved an analysis of when and where that language has ever been relevant. And it seems like, except for his own work, it's never been part of these conversations. So I'm wondering if that's really the standard you want to use, or if there is other language that you could use that would be, more helpful.
Sorry.
Or we would be more likely to see HECO actually replenish the fund when their actions were,
Sure.
let's say, negligent.
I think I understand the question.
Yeah.
Two things. One, Mr. Curtis talked about generational equity. Everything we do has generational equity in it when we put infrastructure in the ground, right? And we're about a sustainable Hawaii for the next generation, for my kids and all of your kids. So everything we're spending now is for the next generation. Frequency, risk of wildfires is up, not down, from Mr. Curtis's testimony about Chinatown and past fires. The bottom line is that it holds us up accountable if we're found imprudent, and that's the best standard we can to replenish the fund. And that's after we take care of everybody who's harmed. So if a fire occurs, people are harmed, we settle substantially all the claims. We would tell the commission, please do a prudency review. Reasonable and prudent is the regulatory standard. If they find us imprudent, we would be responsible to replenish the fund by a certain amount, which is based on the shareholders' equity in our transmission and distribution infrastructure. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I'm just worried that the actions of HECO would never rise to that level, and so the utility would never be asked to replenish the fund. So that's my concern.
Understood.
Are there additional questions, Chair?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hawaiian Electric. I guess what is Plan B to improve your credit rating if this measure doesn't move forward? I'm sure these conversations have happened. What else or what other things are you working on simultaneously? Because I think while this helps, there's a lot of other factors in play.
I can try to address it. Outside of legislative action, we have been aggressively pursuing federal loans for critical projects, including to do our bid to do repowering of Waiau to run bio and be more flexible to support renewables on the grid, over $1 billion, as well as Waiena generation projects and batteries. We're working with the Biden administration on a $1.7 billion DOE loan, which would have offset the effects of our credit rating substantially. Things have changed with the new administration, but we're still working with them. We believe we still have a chance. And as you know, we have received $95 million from the federal government. We have aggressively been investing in our grants management office to pursue every opportunity to obtain federal grants and loans. I am a little worried about where that program may go or that there may be delays, but we are already in the reimbursement process for a lot of our wildfire work through the federal government. That's the only other plan we have to mitigate it. We can't slow down the wildfire work, but the unit cost is high because of our credit rating.
How are you planning to finance the implementation of the wildfire mitigation plan?
I mean, through our traditional means, we're going to have to go to the market and issue debt and equity, which will be exceedingly high without this bill.
So I guess why the choice to request legislation for securitization to finance this insurance fund as opposed to the infrastructure costs?
Because the insurance fund, despite what people think, is probably the best, it's not the only step, but it is on the critical path to restore our credit rating and cost of capital. When you apply that credit rating spread improvement, even though it will take a little time, over the life of the securitization and all the investments that we have to make to meet the inclinations and the EO and the existing 2045, on top of our number one priority, which is investing in safety, you will make more money for customers putting it into this insurance fund than you will trying to securitize every dollar we ever do. And you can't do it.
Well, on that question, though, I mean, I think we need to do work on the bill to have customers have a return on their investment for payments they make into the fund.
Sure.
Why was that, I guess, not? I mean, we waited and waited for this draft to come in very last minute, and we're told it was being worked on with all the, entities involved. And then we come to have our hearing, get the testimony, and it sort of seems like people are very far apart on where we should land, so.
I think
There's a
we're
lot of work
very
still to do.
open. I appreciate those comments. And we are very open to working with the stakeholders. I don't think we're as far apart. I think there's some work to do to discuss and explain certain aspects of it. I think a lot has developed in the last several weeks. And I would say there's a lot of support for this bill from people who didn't support the previous version. We took tons of feedback from last year's bill, and we've worked to simplify it, which was a big thing, and really pare it down to what it needs to be. But I appreciate your comments, Chair.
All right, thank you. I guess Energy Office or PUC, just one and then the other. I'm just kind of curious to hear from everyone. This idea of adding a PIM for implementation of the wildfire plan, and I hear what is being said, well, it should just be done regardless, but do you think that would have some impact on the credit rating aspect?
Chair, thank you for the question. I believe it would, I tend to agree with the Office of Consumer Advocacy about the core fundamental function of doing that type of work, and I don't believe a PIM would provide, much greater confidence that that work would be done. It's really a matter of access to capital and doing it.
Okay, all right. Leo, if you have anything else.
As far as the question on the PM, should let the committee know that right now we're actually going into the review year for the first PBR multi-year. So, to change or add PIMs at this moment, right, kind of throws off So, right, it could be for consideration in the next go-around, the next 5-year. The one thing about the PIMs, as you know, right, they're only upside, right? In my opinion, to make it really work, you need the downside too, right? You need the penalty, and that's something that the working group will be looking at, right? How to structure the PIMs, what to focus on for the like. But in general, right, the wildfire mitigation plan, as we review it and as we approve, right, things that we need the utility to do, right, there's the next part of actually looking at the costs of those projects, right? So the utility will have to come back, right, and go, here are the total costs, right? And then we're looking at the costs and then the recovery mechanism for those costs. So there's multiple ways. I think, in my opinion, at this moment, I wouldn't add on a PIM just for this, especially since we're actually going through the review process right now. I think we've issued the order in opening the docket, right? There's a set time frame that we want to get the review done by and a decision by the commission by. And that could be, just in time for the review and looking at the next set of PBR, PIMs, right? Which ones to keep, which ones to add on.
And then a separate question, do you also agree that the shareholder contribution should be a majority?
Well, like Mr. Angelo said, right, I think what we're looking at is, really the impact to the ratepayer. I mean, the day that the proposal came, kind of hit the ground, and already I was bombarded with, are we actually approving, right, $4, right? And it wasn't even before the commission.
We're also looking at the step-in agreement bill, which would be an additional surcharge on bills.
Correct. Yeah. So all of that needs to kind of be taken into consideration. I mean, the step-in bill is, right, for certain things to happen first, and then the state would step in. But likewise, right, we have to look at the total picture.
Yeah. Okay, I'll wrap up there. Any other? Oh, sorry. Back to
That's okay. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to recess for decision-making.
Sorry, I was a little fast there. Welcome back. We're back for decision-making on, first of all, the 9 AM agenda. First up, we have House Bill 1077. Oh, actually, I was going to say, before I go through all the bills, I want to kind of make a blanket statement because there's a lot to get through that. Just as a matter of kind of protocol, we always defect the date on these bills. So if I miss saying it on one particular bill, the plan is to defect the date on all the bills we're passing out, to blank out any appropriations on bills that we're passing out and note those in the committee report, as well as any numbers for FTEs in any of these bills. We'll blank out and put in the committee report. So if I forget to mention it on a specific bill, just know that I made a blanket statement up front that we're doing that for everything. So first up, for House Bill 1077, we're going to put a defective date on this, and again, blank out all the appropriations as mentioned and move it forward. But I think there's a lot of work to be done on this and the subsequent bill. And so I think that the governor's team, if they want to work on it, needs to put some work in. We're not going to make a bunch of amendments today. We'll leave it to them to work on. I think there's a lot of concerns about what this might be used for. The bill language is extremely open-ended. Climate mitigation and resilience, as laid out in this bill, could apply to almost any project. Members, any discussion? All right, so with that, Vice Chair.
Chair's recommendation on HB 1077 is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Rep. Kahaloa. Aye. Rep. Kush. Aye. Representative Quinlan. Aye. Noting the absence of Representative Ward, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. And same for HB 1076, blanking out appropriations. Note those in committee report, defect the date, and move this forward, noting that it needs a lot of work. And any discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
On House Bill 1076, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting the excused absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. And for House Bill 1459 relating to sustainable aviation fuel, we're going to make some changes here. So on page 2 and 3, we'll just delete subsections B and C. So we're basically paring this down to just a 10% by 2030 goal. And I guess if that is reached, the legislature can come back and consider the viability of extending that out. And on page 3, line 6, we're going to add in consultation with HSCO, so Department of Transportation shall adopt rules in consultation with HSCO. On lines 13 and 14, we're going to take these out. So because we have another bill moving for incentives, we're not going to provide for incentives in this bill. So that's taking out the incentives language. And then similarly on page 4, we'll remove section 3, which is the appropriation. Oh, and then also adopting the definition of sustainable aviation fuel that was provided by the 12 Benefit Corporation in testimony. And we will defect the date and move this forward. Members, any discussion? Vice Chair, please take the vote.
On House Bill 1459, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 790 relating to renewable energy, and this is the kind of big DER bill. So a couple changes here. First, we're going to make the date on page 5 more specific. So that goal of 50,000 new installations of customer-sited DERs in the state by December 31st, 2030. On the same page 5, line 8, we'll change that shall to may for the Public Utilities Commission consideration of tariffs. On page 6, lines 16 and 17, we'll change this to read, shall be credited at a rate sufficient to encourage deployment of DERs in order to meet the goal laid out in whatever section that ends up being that the DER goal is established in. And then starting on page 7 to 16 and the top of 17, we're taking all of this out. So basically, we're paring this down to be just the DER goal and taking out the additional language. And then defecting the date. We'll adjust the preamble, the purpose clause accordingly, and defect the date and move this forward. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 790, a chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and vice chair voting aye, noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. On House Bill 1495 relating to Kehoe Aquifer System, for this, we'll adopt the amendments suggested by DLNR, except for we'll leave the appropriations blank and note those amounts in the committee report and defect the date and move this forward. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 1495, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. On House Bill 1020, relating to a program to characterize carbon sequestration potential and underground water resources statewide. Some small amendments here. We're going to add on page 2, line 19, in collaboration with the UH and in collaboration with DBET Director. And I think the purpose here is just to make sure that we're keeping the focus on the development of energy resources and not on the academic side of things. So just to add balance, we'll add that consultation with DBET. We will blank out the appropriations, note in the committee report some additional technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and defect the date, and move this forward. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 1020, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. And then House Bill 349, we're going to defer since we're using 1020 as the vehicle. House Bill 1307, relating to Department of Hawaiian Homeland. So for this, we're going to blank out the appropriation, note in the committee report, and defect the date and move this forward. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 1307, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 932, relating to green bonds. We will defect the date and move this forward. Members, any discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
On House Bill 932, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, and also noting the absence of Representative Ward. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. And for House Bill 461, we'll go ahead and adopt the OMPO amendments, blanking out appropriations and FTEs in that, and defect the date and move this forward for further discussion. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 461, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Ward is absent. Are there any reservations or no votes? Seeing none, Chair, recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you. And then we have House Bill 982 relating to wildfires. So actually, we're going to defer decision-making on this to tomorrow, Wednesday, February 5th at 11:30 a.m. here in room 325. And that is the end of that agenda. We're adjourned, but we have one more decision-making agenda. So we are back for decision-making on 901 agenda. We have one measure, House Bill 749 relating to cesspools. We were just waiting for numbers from Department of Health on this, so sorry, I have it over here. So for this, we will, there's already a blank dollar amount on page 4, but we will note in the committee report this amount should be $280,000. We will blank out the 3 FTEs and note in the committee report and defect the day to move this forward. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
On House Bill 749, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Kahaloa? Aye. Representative Kush? Aye. Representative Quinlan? Aye. Chair, noting the absence of Representative Ward, Chair recommendation has been adopted.
Thank you, and we're adjourned.
You got a good.